Billionaire restaurateur Benjamin Cole built an empire, but when he goes undercover in his own restaurants, he uncovers a shocking truth. His brand has lost its heart. With a former chef-turned-homeless man as his unlikely ally, he embarks on a journey to restore dignity, one meal at a time. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Benjamin Cole's penthouse office. At 58, Benjamin had accomplished more than most people dreamed of in a lifetime. His chain of five-star restaurants, Cole's Fine Dining, had locations in every major city across the country. But lately, something didn't feel right. Benjamin sighed as he looked out at the city skyline. His assistant, Maria, entered with his usual coffee. "You look troubled," Maria said, placing the cup on his desk. "Something's wrong with my restaurants," Benjamin replied, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "The profits are good, but customer complaints have doubled in the last 6 months." Maria nodded. "I've noticed that in the reports. I've been away from the front lines too long," Benjamin said, taking a sip of coffee. "I built this company by connecting with people, but now I just sit in this office looking at numbers." "What are you thinking?" Maria asked, recognizing the gleam in his eyes. Benjamin smiled. "I'm going to see for myself what's happening. Undercover." That evening, Benjamin traded his designer suit for jeans, a simple button-up shirt, and a worn leather jacket. He even added a baseball cap to disguise his face, which occasionally appeared in business magazines. No one would recognize the billionaire restaurant mogul now. His destination was Cole's Downtown, his flagship restaurant in the heart of the city. As his taxi pulled up, Benjamin observed the elegant facade with its distinctive gold lettering. The restaurant looked as impressive as ever from the outside. As he approached the entrance, Benjamin noticed an elderly man standing near the doorway. The man's clothes were ragged, his gray beard unkempt. He was thin, too thin, and his eyes followed each patron who entered the restaurant with a mixture of longing and resignation. Something about the old man's dignity, despite his circumstances, touched Benjamin's heart. He'd grown up poor himself and never forgot what hunger felt like. Benjamin approached the man. "Evening." The old man seemed startled that someone would speak to him. "Evening to you, sir." "Name's Benjamin," he said, offering his hand. "Harold," the man replied with a firm handshake despite his frail appearance. "Don't mind me. Just warming myself by the restaurant lights before heading to the shelter." Benjamin nodded, then made a decision. "How about dinner first? My treat." Harold's eyes widened. "That's mighty kind, but..." He gestured to his clothes. "They won't let me in there." "Let me worry about that," Benjamin said with a smile. "Everyone deserves a good meal." Together, they walked into Cole's Downtown. The hostess, a young woman named Amber, greeted them with a practiced smile that faltered when she saw Harold. "Good evening," Benjamin said warmly. "Table for 2, please." Amber hesitated, her eyes darting toward the back of the restaurant. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're very busy tonight. Perhaps another establishment might be more suitable." Benjamin frowned. This wasn't the hospitality policy he'd created for his restaurants. "We're happy to wait." Before Amber could respond, a tall man in an expensive suit approached. His name tag read, "Gregory Palmer, Manager." "Is there a problem here?" Gregory asked, his voice smooth but cold. "No problem," Benjamin replied. "We'd like a table for dinner." Gregory's eyes narrowed as he looked at Harold. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. We have certain standards at Cole's Downtown." Benjamin felt a wave of anger rise in his chest. "I'm willing to pay for both our meals." "It's not about the money," Gregory said with a dismissive wave. "This is a luxury establishment. We cater to a specific clientele." The restaurant had grown quiet. Nearby diners were staring, some with embarrassment, others with curiosity. Harold took a step back, his face flushed with shame. "I understand," Harold whispered to Benjamin. "Thank you anyway. I should go." "No," Benjamin said firmly, placing a gentle hand on Harold's shoulder. He turned to Gregory. "So you're refusing to serve a paying customer?" Gregory smirked. "I'm refusing to compromise our atmosphere for other guests who've paid good money to dine here." He gestured to Harold's worn clothes. "Surely you understand." "Actually, I don't," Benjamin replied. He pulled out his wallet and extracted his platinum credit card, the one with his full name embossed on it. "I'd like to speak to the owner." Gregory laughed. "Mr. Cole doesn't involve himself with day-to-day operations. I handle all. Customer issues." "Is that so?" Benjamin asked, pulling out his phone. "What are you doing?" Gregory demanded. "Calling the owner," Benjamin replied calmly, dialing his own office number. Gregory rolled his eyes. "Mr. Cole doesn't take calls from random customers." Benjamin smiled. Paz Maria answered. "Maria, it's me. Would you please call the restaurant line at Cole's downtown and ask for Gregory Palmer?" Gregory's face showed confusion as Benjamin ended the call. Moments later, the restaurant's phone rang behind the hostess stand. Amber answered, then paled. She handed the phone to Gregory. "It's Mr. Cole's office," she stammered. Gregory grabbed the phone, his expression changing from annoyance to confusion. "This is Gregory Palmer. Yes, I'm the manager. What, but how did he—" His eyes widened as he looked at Benjamin, the color draining from his face. "Yes, I understand. Right away." He lowered the phone slowly, staring at Benjamin as understanding dawned on him. "You're—" he began. Benjamin took off his cap. "Benjamin Cole, owner of this restaurant and every other Cole's establishment in the country." A collective gasp rippled through the dining room. Staff members froze in place, watching. The scene unfolded. "Sir, I can explain," Gregory stammered. "I think I've seen enough," Benjamin said, his voice steady and authoritative. "I built this company on the principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Everyone deserves a good meal." He turned to the staff. "From this moment forward, Gregory Palmer is no longer employed by Cole's Fine Dining." Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Sir, please, clean out your office," Benjamin said firmly. "Security will escort you out." As if on cue, the restaurant's security guard approached. Gregory looked around desperately, but seeing no sympathy, he straightened his tie and walked stiffly toward the back. Benjamin turned to Amber, whose hands were trembling. "Call Lisa from accounting. She'll be the interim manager until we find a replacement." "Yes, Mr. Cole," Amber replied, picking up the phone with shaking hands. Benjamin then addressed the stunned diners. "I apologize for the disruption. Your meals tonight are on the house." A smattering of applause broke out, growing louder as Benjamin put his arm around Harold's shoulders. "Now," Benjamin said to the hostess, "please give my friend and me the best table in the house." Amber quickly led them to a prime table by the window. As they sat down, Harold looked at Benjamin with tears in his eyes. "Why would someone like you care about someone like me?" he asked. Benjamin smiled warmly. "Because 40 years ago I was you." Over dinner, Benjamin learned that Harold was a Vietnam veteran who'd fallen on hard times after his wife died. Medical bills had taken everything, and with no children, and his pride preventing him from seeking help, he'd ended up on the streets. "I worked as a chef for 20 years, Harold revealed. "Nothing fancy, just good, honest food." Benjamin leaned forward, an idea forming. "Harold, how would you feel about getting back into a kitchen?" "At my age," Harold chuckled. "Who would hire me?" "I would," Benjamin said. "Not as charity. I need people who understand food and people. That's something you can't learn in culinary school." For the first time that evening, genuine hope flickered in Harold's eyes. As they finished their meal, Benjamin made a decision. He'd been disconnected from his business for too long, trusting managers like Gregory to uphold his values. It was time to get back to basics. "Harold, this is just the beginning," Benjamin said. "I think it's time I checked in on all my restaurants, and I'd like you to come with me." Harold looked stunned. "Me? Why?" "Because you'll see things I might miss," Benjamin explained, "and because everyone deserves a second chance." As they left the restaurant together, Benjamin felt more energized than he had in years. He'd built his empire from nothing, but somewhere along the way he'd lost touch with what mattered most. Tonight was just the beginning. Benjamin had a feeling that with Harold by his side, he was about to discover much more about his restaurants, and perhaps about himself. The city lights glittered around them as they walked toward Benjamin's car, an unlikely pair bound by a meal and a moment of justice. Behind them, the staff of Cole's downtown whispered excitedly, the story of the undercover boss already spreading like wildfire. And Gregory Palmer? He sat alone in his car, tie loosened, staring at the restaurant that had been his kingdom just an hour before. His phone buzzed with a message from a number he didn't recognize. Every person has value. Remember that in your next job. BC. The stage was set. Benjamin Cole's journey back to his roots had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The following morning, Benjamin Cole sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. News of last night's events at Cole's downtown had spread quickly through social media. Someone had recorded the confrontation with Gregory Palmer, and the video already had thousands of views. Never thought I'd be a viral sensation at my age, Benjamin muttered to himself with a slight smile. His phone rang. It was Maria. Have you seen what's happening online? She asked without preamble. I have, Benjamin replied. How bad is the damage control? To his surprise, Maria laughed. Damage control? Benjamin, people love it. The hashtag #BossBenjamin is trending. Your restaurants are getting flooded with reservation requests. Benjamin raised his eyebrows. Really? Really, Maria confirmed. But that's not why I called. Gregory Palmer is in the lobby, demanding to see you. Benjamin frowned. Send him up in 15 minutes. I need to make a call first. After hanging up, Benjamin dialed Harold's number. He'd put the older man up in a hotel last night, promising to contact him this morning. Hello? Harold's voice was hesitant, as if he still couldn't believe someone would call him. Harold, it's Benjamin Cole. I hope you slept well. Like a king, Harold replied with a chuckle. First real bed I've had in months. Good. Listen, I meant what I said last night. I'd like you to come work with me. Help me check on my restaurants. There was a pause. You weren't just being nice because people were watching. No, Benjamin said firmly. I need someone who sees things clearly, without the filter of corporate thinking. Someone who understands both sides of the counter. Well, Harold said slowly, I guess I could do that. Excellent. My driver will pick you up in an hour. We've got a busy day ahead. Benjamin ended the call just as his doorbell rang. When he opened the door, Gregory Palmer stood there, perfectly dressed, as always, but with dark circles under his eyes. The smug expression was gone, replaced by something between desperation and anger. Mr. Cole, Gregory said stiffly. May I come in? Benjamin stepped aside, gesturing toward his living room. Gregory entered, his eyes widening slightly at the modest furnishings. For a billionaire, Benjamin lived simply. I expected something more, Mrs. Gregory began. Extravagant? Benjamin finished, sitting down. I grew up with nothing. Never saw the point in filling rooms with things I don't need. Gregory shifted uncomfortably, remaining standing. About last night, you were doing your job as you understood it, Benjamin interrupted. The problem is, you misunderstood what your job was. I was maintaining the restaurant's high standards, Gregory insisted. Our clientele expects a certain atmosphere. Benjamin leaned forward. My restaurant's primary purpose is to serve good food to people who want to eat it. Everything else is secondary. That's naive business thinking, Gregory argued, forgetting himself. Exclusivity drives our premium prices. Does it? Benjamin asked. Or does excellent food and service do that? He stood up. Gregory, I didn't fire you because you tried to keep a homeless man out. I fired you because you enjoyed doing it. Gregory's face flushed. I need this job, Mr. Cole. No, you need a job, Benjamin corrected. But not at my company, not with those values. He walked to the door. I wish you luck, Gregory. I really do. But our conversation is over. After Gregory left, Benjamin changed into casual clothes again. By the time his driver brought Harold to the penthouse, Benjamin was ready for their day of restaurant inspections. Harold looked different this morning. He'd showered, shaved his beard into a neat trim, and wore new clothes that Benjamin had sent to the hotel. His eyes, however, remained the same, wise and observant. Nice place, Harold commented, looking around. Smaller than I expected, Benjamin laughed. You're the second person to say that today. Their first stop was Cole's Midtown, a busy lunch spot popular with business executives. Benjamin and Harold entered without announcement, taking a table near the back where they could observe operations. Watch how the servers interact with different customers, Benjamin instructed quietly. I want to see if everyone gets the same treatment. They ordered simple meals and observed. The restaurant was busy, with servers moving efficiently between tables. Most customers received prompt, professional service, but Benjamin noticed something concerning. The tables by the window get checked on more frequently, Harold observed before Benjamin could mention it. And look at table 12. Benjamin turned discreetly. A middle-aged woman in a worn but clean business suit sat alone, checking her watch repeatedly. Her water glass was empty, and she hadn't been given a menu yet, despite having been seated. Before they arrived, she's been waiting at least 15 minutes, Harold said. But the host seated 3 other parties after her, and they've already ordered. Benjamin nodded, his jaw tightening. He flagged down a passing server. "Excuse me," he said politely. "The woman at table 12 seems to have been forgotten." The young server glanced over and grimaced. "Oh, that's Melanie's table. She's on break." "Could you help her?" Benjamin asked. The server hesitated. "We're not supposed to take each other's tables, managers' rules, I see," Benjamin said. "And who's the manager today?" "Mrs. Winters, she's in the office." Benjamin thanked him and turned to Harold. "Let's split up. I need to have a word with Mrs. Winters. Can you check on the kitchen?" Harold nodded, his eyes lighting up at the prospect of seeing a professional kitchen again. Benjamin found Diane Winters in a small office, focused on spreadsheets. She looked up with irritation when he knocked. "We're not hiring," she said dismissively. "Actually, I'm not looking for a job," Benjamin replied. "I'm Benjamin Cole." Diane's expression changed instantly. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Mr. Cole, we had no idea you were coming. I would have prepared—" "That's the point of an unannounced visit," Benjamin interrupted gently. "I noticed some concerns about service patterns on the floor." Diane's smile faltered. "Concerns? Some customers seem to receive more attention than others," Benjamin explained. "For instance, there's a woman who's been waiting for service for 15 minutes. "Oh, that must be a mistake," Diane said quickly. "We pride ourselves on equal service." "Equal isn't the same as equitable," Benjamin pointed out. "Some customers need more attention than others. First-time diners, for example, or people dining alone." Before Diane could respond, Harold appeared at the door. His expression was grim. "Kitchen's not good," he said simply. Benjamin frowned. "What? Did you see?" "Food waste, lots of it," Harold replied. "Perfectly good vegetables being thrown away because they're not pretty enough. Steaks trimmed excessively, the scraps tossed instead of used for stocks." Diane looked defensive. "Our customers expect perfection." "They expect value," Benjamin corrected. "And respect for food." He turned to Harold. "Anything else?" Harold nodded. "Two cooks making jokes about cheap customers who order the less expensive items. One called them poor people dishes and said they don't bother with presentation. For those orders," Benjamin's expression hardened. "Mrs. Winters, I think we need to have a conversation with your kitchen staff. Now." The meeting was uncomfortable but necessary. Benjamin gathered the entire restaurant staff in the dining room during the afternoon lull. He didn't yell or make threats. Instead, he told them about growing up poor, about how his mother had saved for months to take him to a nice restaurant for his 16th birthday. "The server treated us like we didn't belong," Benjamin recalled. "I promised myself that if I ever owned a restaurant, everyone would be treated with respect, regardless of what they ordered or what they wore." He introduced Harold, explaining his new role as customer experience consultant. Some staff members exchanged skeptical glances. "Harold knows more about hospitality than most culinary school graduates," Benjamin told them. "He'll be working with me to evaluate all our locations." By the time they left Cole's Midtown, Benjamin had established clear expectations and promised to return soon. He hadn't fired anyone, but he'd made it clear that changes were coming. "You were kinder than I expected," Harold commented as they drove to their next destination. "Gregory was a lost cause," Benjamin explained. "His attitude was intentionally cruel. The staff here just need guidance and reminder of our values." Their next stop was Cole's Riverfront, the newest and most exclusive location. As they approached the lavish entrance, Harold hesitated. "Maybe I should wait in the car," he suggested. "This place looks even fancier than downtown." Benjamin shook his head. "You're my consultant now. Besides, I want to see how they treat you." The hostess at Riverfront, Veronica, immediately recognized Benjamin despite his casual attire. Her smile was warm and professional as she greeted them. "Mr. Cole, what an honor. Would you like your usual table?" "Actually," Benjamin said, "my colleague and I would like a regular table. We're here to experience the restaurant as typical customers." "Would?" Veronica didn't even blink at Harold's appearance. She led them to a nice table with a river view and handed them menus. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said. "Would you like to speak with our executive chef?" "I'm sure Chef James would be honored to prepare something special." "Not necessary," Benjamin replied. "We'd like the standard experience, please." Once Veronica left, Harold looked impressed. She didn't even hesitate. "Veronica's one of our best," Benjamin said with pride. "She started as a dishwasher 5 years ago and worked her way up. Their server, Marcus, was equally professional, treating them with attentive but not overbearing service. The food was exceptional, and Benjamin was pleased to see consistent quality in every dish." After the meal, they asked for a tour of the kitchen. Chef James ran a tight ship, clean, organized, and surprisingly quiet compared to most restaurant kitchens. "What happens to the unused food?" Harold asked. "We partner with a local shelter," Chef James explained. "Anything that can't be served to customers but is still perfectly good goes there. Mr. Cole's policy." Benjamin nodded, pleased. "I'm glad to see it's being followed." As they were leaving, Benjamin noticed a young woman in a server's uniform sitting alone in the staff area, crying quietly. He motioned for Harold to wait and approached her. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. The young woman looked up, startled. She quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm fine, sir, just taking a moment." "I'm Benjamin Cole," he introduced himself. "What's your name?" "Emily," she replied, her eyes widening. "Emily Martinez. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. I didn't recognize you." "No need to apologize," Benjamin assured her. "What's troubling you, Emily?" Emily hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "My mother's sick. I've been trying to get more shifts to help with her medical bills, but..." She trailed off. "But what?" Benjamin prompted. "Some of the servers say I'm taking their good tables," she admitted. "There's been some tension," Benjamin made a mental note. "How long have you worked here, Emily?" 6 months, she replied. "I love it, really. The customers are nice, and Chef James is amazing." "And your mother? What kind of care does she need?" Emily explained that her mother needed specialized treatments not covered by insurance. The bills were overwhelming for a single parent supporting 2 younger siblings. By the time Benjamin and Harold left Riverfront, Benjamin had Emily's contact information and a promise to look into her situation. "You're going to help her, aren't you?" Harold asked as they got into the car. Benjamin nodded. "My company has a medical emergency fund for employees. Emily should qualify." He looked thoughtful. "But the tension between servers is concerning. Could be another Gregory Palmer in the making." As they drove back to Benjamin's penthouse, Harold seemed troubled. "What's on your mind?" Benjamin asked. Harold sighed. "Just thinking about how differently people can interpret the same values. Downtown was openly hostile to outsiders. Midtown ignored certain customers. But Riverfront seemed perfect, on the surface. Yet has its own hidden problems," Benjamin finished. "Exactly why I needed fresh eyes." Back at the penthouse, Benjamin poured them both a drink. "Tomorrow we visit 2 more locations," he said. "Based on what we've seen, I think it's time for some company-wide changes." Harold raised his glass. "To seeing things clearly." Benjamin smiled. "To second chances for everyone." As evening fell over the city, Benjamin knew he had made the right decision. With Harold's help, he would reconnect with the heart of his business, and perhaps help more people like Emily and Harold along the way. But as he looked out at the skyline, Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that their most challenging restaurant visit was yet to come. The next morning, Benjamin woke early, his mind already racing with plans. The restaurant visits yesterday had shown him both the best and worst of his company. Today, they would visit Coles Lakeside, his oldest location, and Coles Boulevard, which had the highest profit margin, but also the most customer complaints. Over breakfast, Benjamin showed Harold a folder of reports. "These are the customer satisfaction surveys from the past 6 months, Benjamin explained. "Notice anything?" Harold studied the charts, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Boulevard has high numbers for food quality, but low scores for service. And Lakeside, he paused. Lakeside is dropping in all categories. Benjamin nodded grimly. Lakeside was my first restaurant. I ran it personally for 5 years before expanding. Something's very wrong there. You seem worried, Harold observed. The manager at Lakeside is Robert Nash, Benjamin said. He's been with me from the beginning. Started as my sous chef. An old friend, Harold noted. Yes, Benjamin admitted, which makes this harder. They decided to visit Boulevard first. The restaurant was located in the heart of the shopping district, catering to wealthy shoppers and tourists. Even at 11 a.m., there was a line outside. Instead of announcing themselves, Benjamin and Harold joined the queue. After 20 minutes, they reached the hostess stand, where a harried young man was managing the wait list. 2 for lunch, Benjamin said. The hostess barely looked up. 45-minute wait. That's fine, Benjamin replied. Name? The hostess asked, still not making eye contact. Cole. That got his attention. The young man's head snapped up, his eyes widening. Like the restaurant? Benjamin smiled. Exactly like the restaurant. The hostess swallowed hard. Are you Benjamin Cole, he confirmed, and this is my colleague Harold. The young man, whose name tag read Jason, looked panicked. Sir, I'm so sorry about the wait. We can seat you immediately. Benjamin held up his hand. No special treatment, please. We'll wait our turn. As they moved to the waiting area, Benjamin whispered to Harold, Watch how they handle the crowd. The waiting area was packed, with customers standing uncomfortably close together. The bar was doing brisk business, but Benjamin noticed that people who ordered drinks weren't getting seated any faster, despite what appeared to be an unofficial policy at many restaurants. They're not playing favorites, Harold noted approvingly. Everyone waits their turn, Benjamin nodded. Good sign. When they were finally seated, their server was professional but rushed. She rattled off the specials so quickly that Benjamin had to ask her to repeat them. Their food arrived promptly, but when Benjamin asked for extra sauce, the request was forgotten until he asked again. She's serving too many tables, Harold observed after the server hurried away. Look around, there are only 4 servers on the floor for this entire section. Benjamin frowned. They're understaffed. After their meal, Benjamin asked to speak with the manager. A few minutes later, a woman in her 30s approached their table. Her name tag read, Sophia Chen, manager. Mr. Cole, she said, offering her hand. What a surprise. Is everything all right with your meal? The food was excellent, Benjamin assured her, but I noticed you seem short-staffed today. Sophia's professional smile faltered slightly. We're managing. May we speak in your office? Benjamin suggested. Once in private, Sophia's composure cracked. I've been sending emails to corporate for months, she said, pulling up her message history. We need at least 3 more servers and another line cook. Turnover is high because everyone's overworked. Why hasn't this been addressed? Benjamin asked, frowning at the dozens of unanswered emails. Regional Director Peterson says our labor costs are already too high, Sophia explained. He told me to make do with what we have. Benjamin made a note. Peterson overruled your staffing requests without consulting me. He said the budget was final, Sophia confirmed. But with only 4 servers on the lunch shift, everyone's exhausted. That's why our service scores are suffering. Benjamin turned to Harold. What do you think? Harold had been quiet, observing. The kitchen looked clean and organized. Food quality is excellent, but the servers can't provide good service if they're running between too many tables. Benjamin nodded, then turned back to Sophia. Consider your staffing requests approved. I'll deal with Peterson. Sophia's relief was palpable. Thank you, Mr. Cole. As they left Boulevard, Benjamin was thoughtful. The problem wasn't with the restaurant itself, but with the system above it. Sometimes the fish rots from the head, Harold commented. Benjamin winced. Point taken. Their next stop was Lakeside, and Benjamin grew increasingly tense as they drove there. The restaurant was set on the shores of the city lake, with outdoor seating and stunning views. It had once been the crown jewel of the Coles dining empire. You're worried about your friend, Harold observed as they parked. Robert and I came up together, Benjamin admitted. He was there when I couldn't afford proper kitchen equipment, when I was working 18-hour days. Loyalty matters, Harold said. but so does maintaining standards. The moment they walked in, Benjamin could see the problems. The once gleaming floors were scuffed and dull. The hostess stand was unmanned. Tables hadn't been properly cleared. "Hello?" Benjamin called out. After a moment, a teenage server appeared, looking annoyed. "Sorry, we're short-staffed. Table for two." "Yes, please," Benjamin replied, hiding his disappointment. The girl led them to a table with a dirty water glass and crumbs on the seats. She didn't notice or care. "Someone will be with you." "Eventually," she said before walking away. Harold raised his eyebrows. Not a good start. They waited 15 minutes before a server approached. By then, Benjamin had observed multiple issues: servers on their phones, long waits for food, and worst of all, a heated argument between a chef and a server that customers could clearly hear from the kitchen. When they finally ordered, Benjamin requested a simple steak, medium rare. "Actually," the server said with a bored expression, "we're out of the steak." "The menu says it's your signature dish," Benjamin pointed out. The server shrugged. "We run out a lot. The supplier's unreliable." Benjamin knew this was false. His restaurants used the same supplier, and they were exceptionally reliable. Their food, when it finally arrived, was mediocre at best. Benjamin's fish was overcooked, and Harold's pasta was lukewarm. "I need to see Robert," Benjamin said quietly. "If he's even here," Harold replied, nodding toward a group of servers who were openly discussing their absent manager. Benjamin approached them directly. "Excuse me, is Robert Nash here today?" One server looked up lazily. "Who's asking?" "Benjamin." "Cole?" The effect was immediate. The servers straightened up, expressions changing from boredom to panic. "Mr. Nash is in his office," one of them said quickly. "I'll get him right away." Minutes later, Robert Nash emerged from the back, wiping, his hands on a napkin. He was heavier than Benjamin remembered, with bloodshot eyes and a forced smile. "Benny!" he exclaimed with false cheer. "What brings you to our neck of the woods?" Benjamin gestured to the half-empty restaurant. "I think you know." Robert's smile faltered. "Let's talk in my office." Robert's office was as disorganized as the restaurant, piles of paperwork, empty coffee cups, and a half-eaten sandwich on the desk. Benjamin noticed a bottle of whiskey poorly hidden in a drawer. "What's happening here, Robert?" Benjamin asked, getting straight to the point. "This place is falling apart." Robert slumped into his chair. "It's been a tough year, Benny." "It's been tough for all our locations," Benjamin countered. "The others are managing." "They didn't go through a divorce," Robert said bitterly. "They didn't lose their house." Benjamin's expression softened. "I didn't know. Why didn't you call me?" "Pride, I guess," Robert admitted. "I wanted to handle it myself." He gestured vaguely. "I know things have slipped. I'll get it back on track." Harold, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "This isn't a recent problem. The maintenance issues I've seen take months to develop." Robert looked at Harold with irritation. "And who are you exactly?" "This is Harold, my new consultant," Benjamin explained. "And he's right, this didn't happen overnight." Robert's face reddened. "So you're checking up on me? After all these years, you don't trust me?" "This isn't about trust," Benjamin said firmly. "It's about responsibility. You're responsible for this restaurant, for the staff who depend on their jobs here, and for the customers who trust our name." Robert stood up, anger replacing shame. "You've got it all figured out, don't you? The great Benjamin Cole, perfect businessman with his perfect restaurants." "That's enough," Benjamin said quietly. "You know that's not true." "Do I?" Robert challenged. "You disappeared into your corporate office years ago, left the rest of us to do the real work." Benjamin took a deep breath. "I see two options here, Robert. Either you take a leave of absence and get yourself together, or I'll have to let you go." Robert laughed bitterly. "So that's it? 20 years of friendship, and you'll fire me because of one bad inspection?" "This isn't about friendship," Benjamin replied, his voice steady but sad. "It's about the standards we both used to believe in." Robert stared at him for a long moment, then seemed to deflate. "I need this job, Benny." "Then take the leave," Benjamin urged. 6 weeks, fully paid. Get some help, clear your head. The position will be waiting when you return." After a tense silence, Robert finally nodded. "Who'll run the place while I'm gone?" "I will," Benjamin said, surprising both Robert and Harold. "It's time I remembered what it's like on the front lines." As they left Lakeside, Harold looked concerned. "You're going to manage the restaurant yourself?" Benjamin nodded. "For a few weeks, until we find a temporary replacement. I need to understand exactly what went wrong here." "What about the rest of our inspections?" Harold asked. "They'll continue," Benjamin assured him. "But I'll split my time between here and the other locations." Back at Benjamin's penthouse that evening, Maria arrived with stacks of personnel files and reports. "I've compiled everything on Regional Director Peterson as you requested," she said, placing the files on his dining table. "And I've arranged interviews for additional staff at Boulevard." "Thank you, Maria," Benjamin said. "There's one more thing. I need you to set up a company-wide management meeting. All location managers, regional directors, everyone." Maria raised an eyebrow. "That's over 30 people. What's this about?" Benjamin shared what they'd found during their inspections, the good and the bad. "It's time for some major changes," he concluded. "We've lost sight of our original mission." As Maria left to make arrangements, Harold helped Benjamin sort through the files. "Peterson has been systematically cutting staff at all the locations he oversees," Harold noted, reviewing the documents. "Profits are up, but customer satisfaction is plummeting." Benjamin nodded grimly. "Classic case of short-term thinking. Boost this quarter's numbers at the expense of long-term reputation." "What will you do with him?" Harold asked. "The same thing I did with Gregory," Benjamin replied. "Some problems can't be fixed with training." They worked late into the night, identifying patterns and preparing for the changes ahead. By midnight, they had outlined a new company structure that would refocus on Benjamin's original values. "This is going to shake things up," Harold warned, reviewing their plans. "Good," Benjamin said firmly. "We've been comfortable for too long." As Harold prepared to leave, Benjamin stopped him. "I have a proposition for you." Harold looked curious. "Another restaurant to inspect?" "No," Benjamin said. "A more permanent position. I need someone who sees things clearly, someone with both kitchen experience and people skills." "What position?" Harold asked cautiously. "Vice President of Customer Experience," Benjamin replied. "You'd report directly to me, with authority to inspect any location without warning and implement changes as needed." Harold stared at him in disbelief. "You're offering an executive position to a man who was homeless 2 days ago?" "I'm offering it to the most observant, honest person I've met in years," Benjamin corrected. "Someone who understands both sides of the restaurant business, the glamour and the struggle." Harold was silent for a long moment. "People will talk. Say you've lost your mind." "Let them talk," Benjamin said with a smile. "I know what I'm doing." Finally, Harold extended his hand. "I accept, on one condition." "Name it," Benjamin said. "Every Coles restaurant implements a weekly community meal," Harold said. "One night, where people who can't afford to dine with us normally can experience a good meal with dignity." Benjamin's smile widened. "I was thinking monthly, but weekly is better. Deal." As they shook hands, Benjamin felt more energized than he had in years. The next day would bring the beginning of major changes: Peterson to deal with, Robert's restaurant to temporarily manage, and a company-wide meeting to plan. But for the first time in a long time, Benjamin felt connected to the heart of his business again. With Harold by his side, he would restore not just the quality of his restaurants, but the values they were built on. What neither man knew was that Gregory Palmer hadn't accepted his dismissal quietly. Even now, he was meeting with Alexander Davis, Benjamin's biggest competitor in the restaurant business, sharing insider information and plotting his revenge. The coming storm would test not just Benjamin's business acumen, but the newfound friendship between a billionaire and a former homeless man that was already changing both their lives. The large conference room at Coles' corporate headquarters buzzed with nervous energy. 35 managers and regional directors sat around the massive table whispering among themselves. None of them knew exactly why they had been summoned, but rumors had spread about Benjamin Coles' surprise visits to various locations. At precisely 9 a.m., the double doors opened. Benjamin entered, followed by Harold and Maria. The room fell silent as Benjamin took his place at the head of the table. "Good morning," Benjamin began. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Some of you have met my new colleague, Harold Wilson. As of yesterday, Harold is our Vice President of Customer Experience." Murmurs rippled through the room. Several directors exchanged bewildered glances. Harold, dressed in a new but modest suit, stood tall beside Benjamin, meeting the curious and sometimes judgmental stares with quiet dignity. "Before we go further," Benjamin continued, "I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Yes, until recently Harold was homeless, and yes, I met him when he was turned away from one of our restaurants." The murmurs grew louder. A man in an expensive suit, Regional Director Peterson, leaned over to whisper something to the woman beside him, smirking slightly. "Something to share with everyone, Mr. Peterson?" Benjamin asked, his voice carrying across the room. Peterson straightened, clearing his throat. "No, sir. Just surprised by the unconventional hiring decision." "Unconventional," Benjamin repeated. "That's one way to put it. Another way is inspired. Harold sees our business from a perspective none of us can match, as both an experienced chef and as someone who's been on the receiving end of poor treatment." Benjamin moved to a large screen on the wall and pulled up a series of charts. "These are our numbers for the past 2 years," he explained. "Profits up 15% across the board. Impressive, right?" Many nodded in agreement. "Now let's look at these," Benjamin continued, switching to new charts. "Customer satisfaction, down 22%. Employee retention, down 31%. These are also our numbers." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. "We've lost our way," Benjamin said simply. "We've forgotten what Cole's fine dining was built on. Quality food served with dignity to everyone who walks through our doors." For the next hour, Benjamin outlined the issues he and Harold had discovered. During their inspections, he didn't name specific managers, focusing instead on systemic problems. "With one exception," Benjamin said, his tone hardening. "Mr. Peterson, your policy of cutting staff to boost short-term profits ends today. Your directive to managers to ignore their staffing requests was not authorized by me." Peterson sat up straight, his face flushing. "Those decisions were within my authority. The profit margins were achieved at the expense of our employees and customers," Benjamin interrupted. "That's not how we do business." "With all due respect, Mr. Cole," Peterson argued, "running restaurants is about the bottom line. This isn't a charity." Harold spoke up for the first time. "If it's just about money, why not serve cheaper ingredients? Why not cut corners on food quality?" Peterson scoffed. "Because customers would notice." "They notice when they're treated poorly too," Harold replied calmly. "They notice when their server is handling too many tables to give proper attention. They notice when the hostess is too rushed to smile." Benjamin nodded. "Exactly. Which brings me to the changes we're implementing, effective immediately. The new policies were comprehensive. Staffing levels would be determined by customer volume, not arbitrary budget caps. Each location would hold monthly community meals for those who couldn't normally afford to dine there. A new anonymous reporting system would allow employees to flag issues without fear of retribution. And finally, Benjamin concluded, every manager in this room will spend 1 week per year working in entry-level positions at their own restaurant, serving tables, washing dishes, greeting customers. This announcement was met with shocked silence followed by protests. "That's not in our contracts," one manager objected. "Your contracts have just been updated," Benjamin replied. "Those who don't wish to participate are free to seek employment elsewhere." As the meeting adjourned, Peterson approached Benjamin, his expression tightly controlled. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Your sentimentality will tank this company." Benjamin smiled. "That's where you're wrong, Peterson. Treating people with dignity isn't sentimentality, it's good business. But you don't have to worry about it anymore. Your position has been eliminated." Peterson's face contorted with anger. "You'll regret this, you and your homeless charity case." Benjamin's smile disappeared. "That charity case has more integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body. Security will escort you to clean out your office." As Peterson was led away, Harold joined Benjamin. That went about as expected, Benjamin sighed. Change is never easy, but speaking of change, we have a restaurant to run. For the next 2 weeks, Benjamin split his time between his corporate duties and managing Lakeside. Under his direct supervision, the restaurant underwent a dramatic transformation. Floors were polished, tables properly set, and staff retrained on the original Coles service standards. Harold implemented the weekly community meal program, starting with Lakeside as the pilot. Every Tuesday evening, the restaurant opened its doors to those who couldn't normally afford to dine there, serving a simplified but elegant menu at no cost. We're not just feeding people, Harold explained to the staff. We're treating them with the same respect we show our wealthiest customers. The program wasn't without challenges. Some regular customers complained about the different clientele. A few servers balked at the extra work without additional tips. Benjamin addressed these concerns directly. This isn't charity, he told his staff. It's integrity. It's remembering where many of us, including me, came from. Gradually, resistance gave way to pride. Servers began to volunteer for the community meal shifts. Regular customers started donating to expand the program. Local media picked up the story, and reservations at all Coles locations surged. One evening, as Benjamin was overseeing dinner service at Lakeside, Maria rushed in, her expression urgent. "You need to see this," she said, handing him her tablet. On the screen was an article from a prominent business magazine. The headline read, "Coles Crisis, Inside Source Reveals Financial Troubles." Benjamin scanned the article quickly, his frown deepening. It claimed that Coles Fine Dining was on the verge of bankruptcy, that Benjamin's erratic behavior and questionable hiring practices were signs of a company in free fall. "The source is anonymous," Maria said, "but it has to be Peterson, or maybe Gregory, or both," Benjamin mused. This reads, like Peterson's analysis with Gregory's vindictiveness. Harold joined them, having just finished training new hosts on proper greeting protocols. Benjamin showed him the article. "They're trying to damage your reputation," Harold observed. "Scare away customers and investors," Benjamin nodded grimly. "And it might work if we don't respond quickly." They returned to Benjamin's penthouse to develop a strategy. Maria had already traced the article to Alexander Davis's publishing connections. Alexander owned Davis Dining, Coles' biggest competitor, and had been trying to poach Benjamin's chefs and managers for years. "We need to counter with transparency," Benjamin decided. "Full financial disclosure to show we're stable. And I'll give an exclusive interview addressing the changes we're making." "That might not be enough," Maria warned, "for these rumors can take on a life of their own." Benjamin paced the room, thinking. Then he stopped, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Harold, what if we accelerated the community meal program, roll it out to all locations immediately, with media coverage?" Harold looked thoughtful. "Turn a potential crisis into positive publicity?" "Exactly," Benjamin replied. "Show that we're not just stable, we're expanding our mission." The plan was set in motion. Benjamin arranged an exclusive interview with a respected business journalist, providing full access to Coles' financial records to prove the company's stability. Meanwhile, Harold coordinated with all location managers to launch the community meal program simultaneously. The day before the interview, Benjamin received an unexpected visitor at Lakeside. Robert Nash, looking healthier and more rested than he had in months, stood nervously at the host stand. "Robert," Benjamin greeted him, surprised. "You're not due back for another 2 weeks." "I know," Robert replied, "but I've been following. What's happening? The article, the rumors." He hesitated. "I wanted to see if I could help." Benjamin led Robert to a quiet table in the corner. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Robert admitted. "The counseling helped. So did the time away." He looked around the restaurant, now spotless and running smoothly. "You've worked miracles here." "The staff did the work," Benjamin corrected. "They just needed proper leadership and clear expectations." Robert nodded, looking down at his hands. "I let you down, Benny. Let myself down too." "We all stumble," Benjamin said gently. "The question is whether we get back up." "I want to," Robert said, meeting Benjamin's eyes. "But I don't think I should be the manager here anymore." Benjamin raised his eyebrows. "Oh? I've been thinking a lot during my leave," Robert explained. "I'm a good chef, but I'm not a great manager. Never was, really. You were just too loyal to see it." Benjamin smiled sadly. "Maybe we were both blind to it. I want to come back," Robert continued, "but as head chef, not manager. That's where I belong. In the kitchen, not pushing papers." Benjamin considered this. "Are you sure?" Robert nodded firmly. "Positive. And I have a suggestion for the new manager, Lisa, from the dinner shift. She's organized, respected by the staff, and genuinely cares about the customer experience." By the end of their conversation, they had a plan. Robert would return as head chef, with Lisa promoted to manager. Benjamin was pleased, not just with the solution, but with Robert's self-awareness and humility. The next day, Benjamin's interview aired on national television. He was open about the recent changes, framing them as a return to core values rather than a new direction. "Success made us comfortable," he explained to the interviewer. "We started focusing on numbers instead of people. These changes are about remembering that restaurants aren't just businesses, they're community spaces where people come together over food." When asked about Harold, Benjamin told their story without embellishment. "Harold reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that dignity matters as much as good food. That's why he's now leading our new community initiative." The camera cut to footage of the first company-wide community meal night. All 23 Coles locations were filled with people who rarely got to experience fine dining. Families from shelters, elderly people on fixed incomes, students struggling to make ends meet. They were being served with the same attention and respect as full-paying customers. The interview was a success. Reservations surged again. The negative article was largely forgotten as a new narrative took hold. Benjamin Cole as the principled restaurateur returning to his roots. A week later, Benjamin received another visitor at his office, Gregory Palmer. Unlike Robert, Gregory showed no humility or self-reflection. He demanded a meeting, and Benjamin granted it out of curiosity. "I assume you know I was behind the article," Gregory said smugly as he sat down. Benjamin nodded. "You and Peterson, with Alexander Davis's backing." Gregory's smile faltered slightly. "You can't prove that." "I don't need to," Benjamin replied calmly. "It failed. Our business is stronger than ever." Gregory leaned forward. "I came to make you an offer. Davis Dining wants to buy Coles. Alexander is prepared to pay 30% above market value." Benjamin laughed. "Is that what this was about? Driving down our value so Alexander could swoop in with a generous offer?" "It's a good deal," Gregory insisted. "You could retire completely, never work another day." Benjamin studied Gregory for a moment. "You really don't understand me at all, do you? I never did this just for money." "Everyone has a price," Gregory argued. "Perhaps," Benjamin conceded. "But mine isn't monetary." He stood up. "The answer is, no, Coles is not for sale." After Gregory left, Benjamin called an impromptu meeting with Harold and Maria. "Alexander Davis is getting desperate," Benjamin explained. "First the smear campaign, now a buyout offer. We need to stay vigilant. I've heard rumors that he's approaching our suppliers, trying to negotiate exclusive contracts," Maria reported. Benjamin frowned. "That could be a problem. Many of our signature dishes rely on specific ingredients." Harold had been quiet, thinking. "What if we removed the middleman entirely?" Benjamin looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "Farm to table," Harold explained. "We buy directly from local producers, maybe even invest in our own farms for certain ingredients." The more they discussed it, the more Benjamin liked the idea. It would secure their supply chain, support local agriculture, and create another positive story about the company. 3 months passed. The changes Benjamin and Harold had implemented were showing results. Employee turnover had dropped significantly. Customer satisfaction scores were the highest they'd been in 5 years. The community meal program had expanded to 2 nights per week at all locations. Robert was thriving as head chef at Lakeside, creating new seasonal dishes that honored the restaurant's legacy while moving it forward. Lisa had proven to be an excellent manager, bringing a natural warmth to customer interactions that had been missing under Robert's leadership. One evening, Benjamin and Harold sat at a corner table at Lakeside, observing the busy dinner service. "Did you ever imagine this when you were standing outside Coles downtown 3 months ago?" Benjamin asked. Harold chuckled. "Not in my wildest dreams. I was just hoping for a hot meal, not a vice presidency." "You've earned it," Benjamin said, sincerely. "The community program alone has transformed our company culture." Harold nodded toward a nearby table, where Emily, the server from Riverfront, whose mother had been ill, was dining with an older woman. "Is that Emily and her mother?" Benjamin confirmed. "The emergency fund covered her mother's treatments. She's in remission now." As they watched, Emily looked over and waved. Benjamin waved back, remembering how close she had come to being overwhelmed by medical bills and work stress. "One person at a time," Harold said quietly. "That's how you change the world." Benjamin raised his glass. "To dignity for all." Harold smiled, raising his own glass. "And to seeing people clearly." Outside the restaurant, the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky. Inside, meals were served, connections made, lives changed in small but significant ways. Benjamin Cole had rediscovered the heart of his business, and in the process, had helped others find their way too. As for Gregory Palmer and Alexander Davis, their attempts to damage Cole's reputation had backfired spectacularly. Davis Dining was now struggling to compete with Cole's renewed popularity, and Gregory's reputation in the restaurant industry was tarnished beyond repair. But that was a story for another day. Tonight was about celebration of good food, of friendship, and of the simple truth that Benjamin had nearly forgotten. Everyone, regardless of their circumstances, deserves to be treated with dignity. Emily's mother caught Benjamin's eye and mouthed a silent, "Thank you." Benjamin nodded in acknowledgement, remembering his own mother and how proud she would be of the business he had built. Not just successful, but meaningful. Not just profitable, but principled. And as Benjamin looked around the bustling restaurant, at the diverse mix of customers, at the staff working with purpose and pride, at Harold, who had gone from homeless to executive in a matter of months, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for Cole's fine dining. A chapter defined not by luxury or exclusivity, but by something far more valuable: humanity. The end.